Hello and welcome to another episode of Culture Club. It's so great that you could join us for these conversations that we've been having over the last few weeks, all about culture. You know, we decided that we'd kind of make the most of the fact that maybe some of us have a little bit more time on our hands right now to delve into something that is a really key topic in the life of our church. And if you haven't joined us for one of these before, maybe you want to catch up. We've spent the last couple of weeks, the first week we explored why culture is so important, why it matters to us so much. And last week, we talked about the first of the distinctives that really defines the culture of our church, which is being motivated by the cause of Christ. We talked about why that's so important, indeed, why that is the kind of preeminent point of our culture, the first of our culture points. And now, over the next few weeks, we're going to delve into the other 4 points of our culture, starting tonight with the topic of servanthood. So I'm so excited to be joined as ever by Pastor Tom, and we're going to delve into this whole idea. So Tom, talk to us about servanthood.
Well, let me start off by saying I went to Hillsong in London, and like I said, I was at one of the 7 services they had that day at Blackfriars at the Mermaid Theatre. And I think one of the things that really hit me was the fact that there were so many people involved. Not only was there singers and musicians, but there were hosts everywhere. And I thought to myself, this is amazing. Going to my first Hillsong conference in London, again, we saw, 20-odd thousand people together worshiping, but there were over 4,000 people serving on team. And I looked at all of that, and I remember one of the questions that was asked of Pastor Brian, how do you do this? How do you get so many people serving? And then he began to talk about the culture of Hillsong. And he says, this is intentional. You can have it in your church as well. And I thought, I want it in our church. I want our church to be a church that serves. One of the things that really annoys me about Christianity is that it's not a spectator sport. It's a participation. Church isn't for you just to arrive 5 minutes before the service starts and leave 10 minutes later after you've had a coffee. You're involved in every aspect of the life of your church. We did a series once in our church called I Love My Church. And, if you love your church, you're not, sort of like on the periphery, just being one of those kinds of people who attends church and etc. Church is an active thing. When we go back to being motivated by the cause of Christ, it's the motivation for the cause of Christ that motivates us to be servants in the house. Because what we're doing is that we're setting up an atmosphere, we're creating an environment whereby anybody that comes in that's new, never been to church, unchurched, pre-Christian, they see something, they feel something, they experience something because of our service. Whether it's in kids, whether it's our hosting team, whether it's the people who set up the venue for us Sunday morning and Sunday night, pull it all down again, whether it's singers and musicians, whether it's just people milling around in the atrium that greet people. What we're doing is we're motivating a large group of people who've got the same vision to actually serve the cause of Christ. And to me, that's what I think is really happening in the life of our church. But it's by intention, not by default. It's happening because we're purposely creating an environment where people can serve.
Yeah, we've talked a bit about, in the first week, we talked about the importance of creating culture by design, not by default. Yeah. And actually, every organization will have a culture, that culture will happen. And if you're not careful, it happens by chance. But actually, we went out of our way, you went out of your way, Pastor Tom, to shape a culture that reflects the kingdom of God. And actually, when we talk about, having a culture that reflects the kingdom of God, you've already talked about how being servanthood is about being motivated by the cause of Christ. But I mean, this is another major example that we see in the life of Jesus, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Of servanthood and why that's so important.
Well, in the book of John, chapter 13, verses 12 to 17, Jesus is washing his disciples' feet. And, back in that culture, washing the feet was done by a servant. You would have a lowly servant person that would come in because washing people's dirty feet, they would wear open-toed sandals, their feet were filthy, there were no sidewalks and lovely gardens. Do you know what I'm saying? They were walking through dirt and mud and muck and all sorts of horrible things. And so when it came to the washing of the feet, it was a menial servant's job. And then Jesus puts a towel around himself and begins to wash his disciples' feet. He gets to Peter, and Peter says, "Oh, Lord, don't just wash my feet, wash all of me." And then Jesus says, "Listen, I'm doing all of this as an example for you, because I want you to serve other people as I'm serving you. This is my example." And I think to myself that if we want to be a fully formed disciple of Jesus Christ, we must become servants to people around us. It's not about prominence. And I get a funny feeling here in the UK every now and then, because there are some people that get a bit nervous about talking to the vicar. Okay, and I don't like that. I don't see myself as a king or a ruler or one of the higher ups. I'm just me. I'm just a servant in the house. The way I employ my services in the areas of communication, working with people and developing leadership. One of my servant attitudes is to provide leadership for the life of our church. But it's not an opportunity for me to get big-headed and very proud. The fact that I have the opportunity to preach and to communicate from the front of the church, it's an incredible, humbling honor for me to do so. It's me using my gifting to serve God and to serve his people. So when Jesus washed his disciples' feet, he was setting up an incredible example for us what to do. Now, Jesus didn't just stop there. In Mark chapter 9, he regarded himself and he said, if you want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, you must become the servant of all. That whole paradox that Jesus sets up. If you want to be first, you've got to become last. If you want to become great, then you have to become a servant. No problems with becoming great. Just the road to greatness was servanthood. And when you follow the road of servanthood and it leads you to greatness, you develop within yourself that sense of humility. And then when you reach the point of greatness, your character is developed enough to be able to hold you in that place of greatness. But servanthood was the thing that led you through. And in the life of our church, it is an intentional, purposeful decision that we are making, that we want to create an atmosphere and create a company of people who understand the dynamic of service and being a servant in the house of God, so that we set our entire direction. This is the ingredient that gives us the flavor that we have. We're servants in the house. And week by week by week, I am just totally blown away by the people who serve in the life of our church and do so with such an open heart and a willing spirit.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that same passage that you mentioned, or rather probably the same account, but the way it's recorded in Matthew. And Jesus kind of calls the disciples together. There's a bit of a row, isn't there? Because two of the disciples, their mum has come to ask if they can have the seat of prominence with Jesus when he comes into his kingdom. And Jesus says to them, but that that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and that high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And I think it's so powerful, Tom, just to pick up on what you were saying, that actually, as you say, Jesus doesn't say that there's an issue with greatness. He just says greatness looks different. That actually, the way that the Gentiles were great, that the non-Jews exercise greatness is to lord it over the people who followed them. And actually Jesus is saying, well, actually in my kingdom, greatness looks different to that. And the way you access that greatness is to serve people. And it's so interesting that Jesus ties this in, to his own example, but also to his sacrifice. That actually when he says, well, actually he came to offer his life in our place, he's saying, this is the greatest example of what it means to serve. And actually, as you say, when we come back to, being motivated by the cause of Christ, actually servanthood is intrinsically linked to our understanding of Jesus' willingness to kind of offer his life in our place.
One of the things that disturbs me about some parts of modern Christianity. And, you know, as a church here in Norwich, Ipswich and Bratislava, we do have an international and group of people that come into the life of our church from other parts of the UK or the world. And many of them have already recorded in their mind and memory that church is something that you just attend, that it becomes an obligation, that you just have to go through the cycle, the ritual of doing it all. And they forget about what it means to give their lives for the lives of others. I see people coming into the life of our church, and I distinctly remember a particular individual that came into a church maybe 8 years ago. And this lady said, I have been really hurt by other churches, and so I'm here, and for this period of time, I'm just going to be served. And I thought, okay, we can cope with that. Eventually, she did get into service and still maintains her service in the life of our church today. I see students coming in who sometimes, you know, treat us like a welcome mat. You know, they come in, they use our bus, they drink our tea and coffee, they use our toilets, and they sit on my chairs and they listen to our great service, but they offer nothing. They give nothing of their own lives into the life of the church. Even in times of worship, they seem to be lackluster and unenthusiastic. And I'm thinking to myself, that's my challenge. I see that, and I think to myself, I want to continue to create an atmosphere where people feel like they're giving their lives, they're giving something of themselves in service. When I see so many of the young men and women and others as well in the life of our church that are literally giving hours and hours and hours to the work of God, I feel incredibly humbled as well to be their leader and their pastor.
Yeah. And I guess that's what I'm thinking about, you know, when Jesus ties this into his example in terms of offering life in our place, that actually until you serve, you're maybe missing out on a full understanding of
Absolutely.
what it means to have a full relationship with God, because actually that was integral to Jesus' mission, was his preparedness to serve and to serve to the point of offering his life. And actually, if we hold back in a sense on serving, we hold back on fully encountering all that God has for us, not just in terms of, you know, what we do, but actually in terms of some of those intangible things that everyone's looking for, that sense of purpose, that sense of significance, that sense of our place in the world. I think that we miss out on that if we don't serve. And Tom, do you think there are other things that people miss out on if they aren't prepared?
Yeah. I think they miss out on the ownership as well. You know, it's interesting. You know, people come along, and you've had this as well as I have. People come up to you. It's their first or second time they've been to our church, and they want to offer stuff. You know, well, I think if you did this, it would be better. I said, well, thank you so much. You know, really appreciate that. Or they'll come up with a tiny, picky little bit, you know, well, when you said that, it's not, you know, really, you should have done. And I think to myself, you come in here and you feel like you can make these kinds of, but you've given nothing into the life of the church. You know, one of the things I think people miss out on when they don't serve or don't have an understanding of what it means to serve is they miss out on ownership, that this becomes my church. And, you know, thank you for your personal opinion, but, you know, personal opinions don't account for much until you've reached a certain level in leadership where then you have a right to speak, you know, but they miss out on ownership. Let me just grab my glasses again. They miss out on the impact that they have on other people as well. You know, I love watching people like Sam and Andy and Luke and others in the life of our church when they have the opportunity to share a briefing and the impact that they have on other people's lives. You know, I look at, you know, Emma Harvey and Nikki Collins and, you know, others that are in the life of our church that because of their level of servanthood, they become leaders and they have an impact on the lives of other people. You know, John Lee just, you know, impresses me so much when I see the impact that he's having, not just with me, but on the lives of other people. And when you don't serve, you don't have that opportunity. You just become a spectator. You come along to church. You have no voice. Do you know what I'm saying? And you know, I really feel for people. Here's another thing. Life's never perfect, eh? And here we are in the midst of lockdown. For me, I wake up in the morning and I think to myself, gee, I need to get out of bed, so I can drag myself to the couch,
Yeah.
or I'm going to put on a load of pajamas so I've got work clothes for tomorrow. But when things don't go according to plan, and let's be honest, there's a lot of that in life. Being a servant in the house helps you. Having been doing this now for 16 years, I hear reports from Bratislava. Oh, this went wrong and that went wrong and this didn't happen. I go, hey, it's okay. Welcome to life. Our teams are so incredible at the moment that if something goes wrong, boom, they've got something to fix it with. I was in Bratislava and we lost power in the evening service. And so what the guys did was they came off the stage, they went onto the ground, and they did this incredibly intimate acoustic kind of service. And it was so good, we repeated it a few months later. That's innovation when a problem comes. And it's when you serve on teams that you've got the opportunity to learn how to function when things go wrong. And it's such a great thing to learn for life as well.
Yeah.
That's what you miss out on when you're not in teams.
Yeah.
Some of the other great things, you miss out on the times of prayer, you miss out on the friendship and the camaraderie, you miss out on discipleship. Most of the discipleship in our church takes place in teams because that's where the rubber hits the road. One young man who resisted these kinds of discipleship implementations, was saying, I can do this better than any. I said, yeah, you probably can, but your attitude really stinks. And it would be great if you could develop a more humble, resilient kind of a spirit that would work together and flow together with other people. Then we could use you. But you see, he resisted that and then eventually came off team. But when you stay on team, that's where discipleship takes place. Servanthood.
And I guess that's what we see in that example you shared from Jesus as well, is that actually, a lot of what his disciples learned from him was learned through experience, rather than him kind of sitting down and teaching them huge reams of scriptural information. It was more about him saying, well, actually, this is how you live out this kingdom culture in your world. Let me demonstrate it for you. And I think there's something so powerful about that, because I think, as you're right, often, or certainly my experience of church was that, a discipleship, so learning what it meant to become a fully developed follower of Jesus, was often, there was a sense that, well, you've got to learn a lot of information. But one of the things I love about our church is actually that, as you say, discipleship happens in teams. I've heard it 100 times, but actually it's so powerful to see that happen. Because I think what you develop is you develop some skills along the way. I've lost count of how many skills I've learned at church that have been so useful for me in my work life. But I think more than that, you develop character. And I think, Pastor Tom, you've often talked about the value of character, but you can't put a price on developing character.
That's right.
And I think you see this, in a work situation, that actually, regardless of what skills you take, character goes with you wherever you go. Your gift might open the door, your talent might open the door, but it's character that keeps you in the room. And actually, I think that one of the things I've noticed is that the more business people seem to kind of climb the ladder in business, the more that kind of character development becomes important, because people don't go looking for skills. They go looking for mentors. They go looking for people who can develop them. They go looking for people who can help them to go to the next level. And that's so much more about, well, what's in us? What is it about the way we live our lives? That's what really has kind of currency in the world today. And actually, I think that's exactly what we learn in team. And we often learn it when we're doing the things that we don't want to do, right? We learn it when we're doing the things that are uncomfortable, the things that are difficult, the things that aren't glamorous, the things that aren't particularly prominent. Those are often the things where we develop the most.
When it comes to the whole concept of servanthood, Jesus himself makes it really clear. Humility is the characteristic that keeps us serving. By becoming a servant, we're honoring others as more important than ourselves, where our purpose is to empower other people to fulfill their destiny. I am one incredibly excited pastor when I look at people like you and your wife Helena, who've been with us 16 years and are just as faithful as the day is long. And, you're not after prominence, and yet God has given you and your wife incredible prominence in the life of our church. But you and I, we would see that prominence from another perspective. We see it as significance, because neither you or your wife are proud or arrogant or demanding or have this elitist sort of attitude about yourselves. There's humility. And where there is humility, character flourishes. Where there's humility, you can develop your integrity. Where there is humility, you begin to develop a sense of authenticity, because you're being humble. There's no need to puff yourself up and become something that you're not. So humility develops that sense of authenticity. And when we become humble, we're becoming like Christ, who was like a lamb led to the slaughter, offering his life as a sacrifice for the whole of mankind. The giving of himself, the shedding of his blood, the giving of his life. There in that humility. Lord, if it's possible, take this cup away from me, nevertheless. Not my will be done, but your will be done. So in humility, it's as people develop that, their character develops as well. And that's what servanthood does. We want you to play this in this key. Well, I think it should be played in another key. Thank you so much for that. But we're asking you to play it in this key. And the response is, sure. And that's where humility begins to develop character. And, I think what people miss out on is the developing of their character. They don't know how to talk. I mean, there are numbers of people in the life of our church who 10 years ago, whose social skills were non-existent. And yet now they carry a great deal of weight and responsibility in the life of their church, our church. And it's amazing how they have developed because of their willingness to be humble. And character, social skills, other talents are there as well. And you're never too big not to wash a toilet or clean a toilet or do a bathroom. And, it doesn't matter. In the book of Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 10, it says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it and do it with all your might. And, that's something that I know you and I have both taken on board, that whatever we do, it's with all of our might. We're going to do the best we can. We're going to pursue excellence. We're going to flow together with other people. We're going to make sure that this job gets done so that Jesus can receive glory, and that when people come in, they're immediately touched by an atmosphere and an environment of humility, of authenticity, of people who are following Jesus. And we reminded everybody about that girl who 9 months after being a member of our church made a commitment to follow Jesus. She said, I could see that you were real. And she served on teams as well. She could see the authenticity. She saw the character. She saw the humility. This is what we're seeking to develop. And this is what people will miss out on, is helping to develop a church that has the ability to impact the unchurched.
Yeah, I think, it's so great. You think about the way that you develop relationships when you serve alongside people as well. I think there's something so powerful about that. And just as you were saying, whatever your hand finds to do, work at it with all your might. I think that kind of whatever it takes spirit is one of the things I love about our church, that actually there's people in church who are prepared to do, whatever it takes. And, I think sometimes we see people who are up there on the platform and, sometimes they think, well, that's the most impressive thing. They watch people leading worship and think, oh, the most impressive thing they've done is the way they've sung or the way they've led or the way they've spoken. But oftentimes I know the most impressive thing they did was the small thing that they did, the toilet they cleaned, the bit of hoovering they did, the thing that they did midweek when no one was looking. And actually, those are the things that can make such a tangible difference. Actually, it's almost easy, to do the prominent thing when everyone's cheering you on. What really builds character is when you do the stuff that needs to happen behind the scenes. And, I think for me personally, I've at times tried to seek out those opportunities. I found it helpful before everything went into lockdown. I'd spent a period of time serving on home team, and I found that there was something really useful, really helpful for me in my personal development, getting up early in the morning, coming in, cleaning toilets, or helping to clean down the place at the end of the day. And not just, because of the kind of, hopefully, that stepping into kind of humility in the sense of doing something which doesn't necessarily get a fanfare, but actually doing that alongside other people, I think is something that's so powerful. And there's a way that you kind of build real bonds with people. I can think of late nights spent editing video in the offices, or you know, down here preparing the space and things like that. And actually, those are the times that kind of, you know, really powerful relationships develop when you kind of go through those experiences of really knuckling down and, you know, doing something that's hard but worthwhile together, I think.
I think back to our singers and musicians, and a lot of people see them on stage and they're dancing and they're singing, etc. That's just the cream on top of the cake. The hard work was, you know, 2 weeks beforehand when they were learning the new song, when they were rehearsing, when they were remembering the words. I'm hopeless at remembering words. You know, if I don't see it up on the screen, I can't sing the song. But these guys, they memorize the words. They memorize the words to hundreds of songs over a year. And then they memorize the chords because they don't have music up there. There's no music stands, you know, and the hard work when it comes to the rehearsal, because you've got 12 people there. You've got singers and then you've got musicians. And there's 12 people on stage and the worship leader is leading that group. Now, the easiest scenario is when everybody says, hey, in humility, we're going to flow together. You're the leader. We're going to follow. But there's always situations where somebody comes up and says, yeah, but I think it should be done this way. And then you stop, and then you pause, and then you talk, and then you share, and more conversation. And now 15 minutes has gone past, and it's now 9:15, 9:30. Everybody wanted to be home by 9. Do you know what I'm saying? So when I see the guys pull it together, like for the Christmas rehearsals, you know, every year I get to about a week before the Christmas presentation, and I think, oh, Jesus, it's not going to work. Oh, Jesus, help us. Nothing. It's a mystery how it all pulls together. But that's leadership. And that leadership is rooted in humility. And that leadership is rooted in an authenticity. You know, that leadership is rooted in that sense of, you know, I'm seeking to walk in my integrity and character. And because of that, people are willing to follow you. And that's what leadership really is. One of the old sayings I heard is, if you're on Twitter and nobody's, what is it? If nobody's following you, you're only typing. So, you know, I don't want to just be one of those people that's just typing. I want people to actually follow. And, you know, if you're ever concerned about your leadership, just pause for a minute, turn around and see how many people are following you and willing to go to the ends of the earth for you. And we tell people all the time, you're not serving Pastor Tom, you're not serving me, you're serving Jesus. And that's what we want people to really have a good clue about as well.
Yeah.
Servanthood, such an important part in the life of our church.
Yeah, I think one of the ways we've talked about it before, I think we might have even mentioned this last time, one of the ways you said it, Tom, is, you know, that actually if you're too big to serve, you're too small to lead. And I think sometimes we think that that's just, you know, it's just a nice saying, but actually I think servanthood opens the door for leadership, as you say. That one of the things I loved in the early days, Tom, was that you resolutely refused to give out titles. And I remember for me and Owen in the early days of kind of trying to establish ourselves as leaders in the life of our church, you were like, yeah, I'm not going to call you anything. I'm not going to tell people that they have to follow you. You know, you gave us opportunity and plenty of support and encouragement and plenty of second chances. But what you didn't do was say to people, you have to follow these guys. And actually, that was so powerful. Like years down the line, actually having to be in a place where you earn respect from people and where people look to you because of the example that you've set, I think is so helpful. Because, you know, sometimes if people you see people who kind of walk around trying to flaunt a title, I'm always like, no, let's stay away from titles as much as possible, because actually, you know, I think a title is great at describing a function, but it's terrible at giving people authority. And actually, the way that you serve is so much better a way to open the door, because then people know if you're real or not, right? They know whether you actually care about this thing. If you're prepared to serve, or you're just there for a bit of prominence, you're just there to boss people around, you're just there because it makes you feel better. Actually, it's so much more significant if you set an example and other people say, I want to follow the example of that person.
I get quite challenged at times with the attitude that certain people have. You know, we talk about people want prominence more than significance. And what they want is to be on stage. What they want is a microphone. What they want is to be able to speak to people. What they don't realize is that the way to get there is through humility and in serving other people. And, in the early days, I remember, was it Dave Gilpin, I think, once said, there's oftentimes a need to just push people a little bit to see what's really inside of them. And Phil, both you and Owen and others in the life of our church had so many times when I came up and pushed just to see what was on the inside. And, the reason that you are in the situation that you're in now, and the reason people like Owen was in the situation he was in, is because you passed those tests of attitude and integrity, and you were willing to humble yourself and respond to leadership at that time. When I came into the life of the church, I'd already been in ministry for 35 years, as a cross-cultural missionary, as a church planter in Australia. And now 16 years later, I'm into my 42nd year of ministry. To me, I've got nothing to prove anymore. I've already done it. I'm already there. So my whole life now, out of a humble desire to see the next generation and the next generation rise up, as I look around, I see the 25-year-olds out there, Sam and Andy and others out there, who are that next generation of leaders rising up. My heart thrills. I look back at some of our first and second year students, and my heart breaks for them, because some of them don't realize the need to get involved and to serve. And, it's like they're dating the vision instead of being engaged with the vision, marrying the vision. And you may be here for 3 years, but that doesn't mean that you just have to be on the peripheries of the church. You can be actually in the heart of the church, even if you're only here for 3 years. Jessica, Abby, who's now moved back to London, she was with us for 5 years, but boy, I tell you what, she was heart and soul. And the humility in that girl, and the development that took place in her life and her spirit. And I could go through a dozen others that spent 3 years, 5 years with us, moved on, and how God is using them in other places as well. One of the girls from our church went to a church closer to London, and on the first week, the senior pastor said, "Would you lead our hosting team?" and she did for a whole year, and then she came back to us. So, you talked about skills that you've learned here that have taken you into your employment as well, which I think is really important. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think there's so many examples of times, that people have seen it go into an employment. I think especially about students, because I guess that's, something I've been integrally involved in ever since I was one. But you see so many people who actually, the things that have made them stand out in their career have not been what they've studied in their degree, but actually have been the skills that they've learned serving in the life of our church.
Exactly.
I think the other thing that I just want to pick up on that you said there, Tom, was just about creating other opportunities for other people to serve. And I think that's something that's so powerful and it's kind of maybe sometimes missed when it comes to servanthood, is that actually one of the ways that you have served is to surrender your opportunities, in a sense, to give others opportunity. You could easily say, well, I'm going to preach every weekend. I'm a great preacher. I'm going to preach every weekend. I've always got something to say. I'm going to be there. But actually, you've created so many opportunities for the rest of us to speak. And actually, that creates a fruitfulness. I was thinking about, the parable of the talents, where, actually Jesus draws attention to 3 people given money by their master as he goes away. And actually the 2 who produce just as much again, they're the ones to whom the master says, well done, good and faithful servant. And actually the good and the faithful servant, we sometimes think it's the person who does the same job all the time. And I think that's true to begin with, is actually that you're consistent in turning up, serving, playing your part. But then actually I think fruitfulness, faithfulness looks like fruitfulness, that actually it's about serving is sometimes about creating opportunities for other people to serve, helping them to come on the journey with you. And that's when you then see that discipleship happen. And that's why that's one of the things you've often emphasized with us, the importance of the big ask, asking other people to get to serve on team. And we sometimes think we're taking something from them, but actually it's something we want for them. We want them to have the opportunity to experience what we've experienced, to develop in the way that we've developed, to get that sense of ownership, to work on their character, to learn what it means to follow Jesus. All of that is something that we can unlock for people if we're prepared to say, hey, do you want to come and join in? Do you want to come and serve with us?
Anyway, that's the culture of our church, isn't it? The whole concept of servanthood, and we're inspiring and encouraging people to learn the value of being a servant in the house of God. We want to touch our city. We really want to touch our city, both Ipswich and Bratislava. And we believe that one of the greatest things that we can do is to serve our city, adding value to the individuals that come into the life of our church by creating an atmosphere and an environment whereby they can be impacted by the very person of Jesus Christ. Jesus said, if you want to be great in the kingdom, you have to be a servant of all. And so hence our great desire to serve and to bring that kind of culture into the life of the church. How does that sound?
Yeah, it's fantastic, Tom. I don't think I realized quite how much there was to say about this until we started talking about it. I'm sure there's a lot more that we can do. Have you got anything you want to say in closing, Tom? Because I realize.
No, I don't actually. I feel like I've not exhausted the thought, but I think we've given enough people enough information for people to now take and digest. And I look forward to the Q&As that's coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, we've been really enjoying doing Q&As, which we've been doing online. If you listen to this in the first few days it comes out, you can join us for that, which has been over at Instagram Live. But hopefully, whether you're able to join us for that or not, today's been really helpful. Thank you so much, Tom, for helping us to dive into culture. And thank you, again, as ever, for setting the example of what it means to serve God faithfully, fruitfully over many, many years. But it's been an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us, whoever you are, wherever you've joined us from. It's been great to have you with us, and we hope to see you next time. We'd love to see Q&A, but we hope to see you next time for Culture Club as well.
God bless you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, Phil.